Welcome back, champions. We're here once again looking at the Siege of Winterfell. This time we're going to focus on the tactics you can potentially employ to lock in the win. Central Blitz is up first. It's one main force driving straight up the centre to Winterfell. You're of course going to want to send a couple of troops to cap the outposts along the way to lock in those first capture bonuses, and just to get those points ticking over in general. Now it takes 13 minutes for the first resource to spawn at Winterfell, so you don't want to hang around there. You want to drive forward and block the entry to the Winterfell Valley that the enemy is going to have to use. There is only two entrances, so if you're starting at the south, you want to block the north, and vice versa. From there, dependent on what the enemy has done, you've got a couple of decisions to make. Now, if you really want to commit to the central or the main force idea, you can choose one side to work on and get into a rotation. If you work around this rotation, you should come fairly close to the 5-minute respawns on the resources, picking one up each time you do the rotation, working towards an outpost, checking the armory, and then back towards your outpost and Winterfell again. The other option is to split into a force of 2 at this point, and go both sides in the same rotation method, making sure that you meet in the centre for the respawns. This is a riskier option and takes more coordination, but obviously you're going to force the enemy to react to 2 sides rather than 1. If they're not really on top of things, they're not going to be sure where that resource is, and they're going to have to communicate where that resource is, even if they do know. So it's potentially a really good option, but of course, dependent on what they're doing. If they have mounted a large force in the centre, you're just going to want to hold that pass and move your troops and move the resources from Winterfell to your own outpost. Two-way split is up next, pretty self-explanatory. You want to split your forces into 2 groups. Generally, you'll nominate a leader for each group, which enables others to follow that leader rather than following instructions. This can be really useful to have a clear chain of command if you've got one main commander that is directing those 2 leaders, or that is one of the leaders themselves and directing the other accordingly, or communicating between the 2. They can hopefully keep their balance and keep their movement generally in check and generally in line. The main members or the others in the group can follow the leader, and while there's intricacies in troop movement and battle, at least they'll generally be in the right spot. They're not going to go too far off course. So the idea is both groups will move up at a steady and consistent pace, capping the towers or the outposts along the way, one moving to armory, the other to the hot spring. Once there, if you can defeat the enemy decisively, you can either push forward or you can head to Winterfell from there, leaving 2 small groups to defend the objectives. It depends on the enemy really as to what you want to go for here and how aggressive you want to play. Obviously, if you've done a good job and taken a lot out or taken enough out, then you're potentially going to want to drive forward to their outposts, blocking the entry to the west and east corridor, so the enemy's forced to effectively fight all the way through to Winterfell and or to either objective. Since you'll have both objectives, it'll be harder for them to do. They will have the benefit of quicker respawns though, and your troops will be walking a much further distance to get back into the fight if they are taken out. So there is a downside to it, but you can push forward and then flank Winterfell if they have moved troops into the centre, or you can go back through your outpost to Winterfell to lock in the resources. My personal favourite is last, the 3-way split. I think this is a really good one for forcing the enemy onto the back foot and making them play a reactive game rather than a proactive game, and I think that's a big advantage in this mode. If you can force them to run around a bit or to be confused, then they can waste a lot of time while you're securing objectives. So the middle team is responsible for taking all the outposts and getting to Winterfell within the 13 minutes. They should be able to do that and drive forward to block the entry, same as the central drive. But on a smaller scale, of course, they're going to have less troops, so depending on the enemy, they may get caught up in battle. But best case scenario, they block the entryway. The western and eastern teams, rather than worrying about the outpost capping, can head straight to the armory in the hot spring. This should mean they arrive first, or close to it. If they can get troops around the armory and the hot spring, I mean, if you've got a team of, say, 50, that means you're going to have 150 armies. That allows you to field 50 on each path. 50 is still more than enough to fill the area around the building. So if you get there first, it's really a hard fight for the enemy to bust enough down and to get enough in the sphere to get influence over the building. So at the very least, you're going to delay them significantly in capturing it. For example, if they've gone with the two-way split and have the numbers, they may wear you down eventually, but provided you get there first, you're in with a good chance. Once those two or those three spots are secured, you can move forward a bit further to their outposts. If you can get to this point and lock each of the paths, there's not a lot the enemy can do, and I just think it's a really effective tactic. That's us done and dusted, champs. Alright, thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed, got something out of it. Gave you a little something to think about at least. I think all of them are potentially really good options. Of course, the battle is fluid and dynamic, so you'll have to adjust and be aware of enemy movements. But best of luck to you.